Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item is to present a working draft of the downtown area plan and discuss completed community engagement, providing the town council with an opportunity to discuss and familiarize themselves with the proposed plan. Duncan Dodson is going to introduce this item.
Welcome, Duncan.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Madam Manager. As Manager Tony said, the purpose of the item tonight is for you all to get a look, to familiarize yourself with the draft plan as it stands so far. There are a lot of items attached to the agenda tonight. We tried our best to kind of signpost where areas of particular interest may be in the plan itself. I wanted to take a brief opportunity here to also speak to laud Friesen Nichols for leading the engagement on this effort, and to speak to a couple of opportunities that have come up throughout the project that the project team has taken to make sure that everyone has a role in participatory planning and visioning in this project. Those include working with the Jackson Center, the Racial Equity Commission, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission, attending Northside neighborhood meetings, Carrboro in Motion, working with our race and equity team to connect with the NAACP, hand-delivering door hangers to all residents in historically Black and African American neighborhoods, as well as sending postcards to all residents and property owners in the downtown area. And then looking forward, our next large community event that we're going to do is Juneteenth on June 19th, bringing the plan out there. And then a final large community engagement event that we are placing kind of strategically at the eastern end of the studying area close to the Lloyd Broad neighborhood. So with that, I will go ahead. Many of you have met Danny Wilson, but I will reintroduce him and let him take it away. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Duncan mentioned, I'm Danny Wilson. I know we met previously when we did some small group meetings, and I'm with Friesen Nichols. We're the consulting firm that the town hired to work on this project, and we have enjoyed working with your staff very much. So this evening, I want to give you an overview of the project team and also an overview of the project itself, our process, how we got to where we are, and then we'll dive right into the plan. As Duncan mentioned, I know the packet was rather lengthy and there are quite a few pages, so definitely feel free to ask. We do have the packet available electronically, so we can pull that up and I'll look at it together if there's specific questions, and then we'll go over next steps of where we're going from here. So as I mentioned, I'm Danny Wilson. I'm the project manager with Friesen Nichols. I'm based out of the Charlotte, North Carolina office. We have 34 offices in 10 states, 1,300 staff members over all disciplines, and we only serve public clients. We do no private work, so we're a public-facing group. With Friesen Nichols, our main folks working on this project, Gail Ferry Catalinas and Alexis Garcia. You see them on the screen. We also partnered with PSG. They were a local firm, actually in Chapel Hill, Amanda Klepper and Alan Steinbeck. Unfortunately, they dissolved as of the end of January, so, but they were instrumental in this project and have their fingerprints all on this plan as well. We work very closely with town staff, as well as I know several of you are on the advisory board group that we've met with a few times and gotten a lot of great feedback from there as well. So real quick overview of the project. Why are we even doing the downtown area plan? So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Carrboro Connects comprehensive plan and that process. Downtown area plan was a priority project identified, and there are many elements of the Carrboro Connects that tie directly to the downtown area. Specifically, economic strategy, sustainability strategy 2.1A was looking at a small area plan for the downtown, which is why the town started on this process to begin with. The document itself, we have it formatted in 2 different volumes. Volume 1, it's almost like having your dessert first. So volume 1 is where we have introduction, brief introduction of the plan itself, and then the master plan, which is really where the meat is, and then implementation, which is a chapter yet to be drafted, so that was not in your draft that you received. And that's really, those 3 are the main pieces you use every single day. Volume 2 has a lot of the background information of how we got to Volume 1. So we wanted to make sure it was approachable for the general public, and so people could just pick up and read Volume 1 and get a really good idea of the goals and intent of the downtown area and the plan itself and how the plan is designed to be implemented to achieve those goals. Volume 2 is really all the background, and for people interested in diving deep into different strategies, different engagement, and how the elements of Volume 1 came to be. You can see those different sections up there, and we're going to look at several of those this evening. To start our study area, you can see on the screen the boundary with Chapel Hill on the right-hand side, or the eastern boundary of the downtown area, follows along Main Street, and then also Jones Ferry Road, Greensboro, where it crosses Main, and then also Weaver Street, and of course, many other streets in the area, but those are the main roads cutting through the project area. So in our planning process, we have public engagement that runs from the very beginning all the way through the very end. You heard Duncan mention all the activities we've been working on. Also, staff has been going out independently and working on things as well and getting the word out about the project and getting feedback. But we start with existing conditions analysis. That's what's on the ground today, demographic data, census data, the built environment. From our public feedback early on, getting vision and goals for the downtown area, what the community would like to see. We approach projects with no preconceived notions of the community. We want to hear what the community wants so we can craft a plan that reflects the community's values and that the community being built is what the community would like to see. We also then worked on character areas, and we'll talk about those in depth here, and then did representative renderings and strategies, which we'll also touch on. And as I mentioned, the last piece is implementation that really brings it home of how the plan goals, objectives, strategies can be achieved through actionable items. As part of our background analysis, we also looked at the Carrboro Connects comprehensive plan. There was a lot of engagement that went into that project, and as I mentioned, there are numerous elements and strategies identified in the comprehensive plan that applied to the downtown area. In particular, there were items about affordable housing, ways to improve the transportation and multimodal network to increase mobility, having green stormwater infrastructure, reducing impervious coverage, looking at water and energy elements, economic sustainability, recreation, parks, and culture, and providing more open space, looking at land use in particular, and then, of course, climate action and environmental elements, all of which apply to the downtown area. So far, these are the events we've hosted. So some of the numbers are estimates because at large events, we didn't actually count. So it was a sort of general, we wanted to underestimate versus overestimate. So I'd say these are very conservative, but we didn't want to say we did more than we did. So, but we also wanted to estimate about how many people we reached out and connected with. So you can see almost 600 people so far, and as Duncan mentioned, we have several other events that we're going to be doing in the future as well. All of the public input, we then compile and create summaries, and also incorporate information in the second volume of the plan about the public engagement events and things we heard. So in the packet you received this evening, you do have all the full summaries from all of those events, the full data. So every single comment we received will be included in the plan appendix. So it will be a rather lengthy appendix, but we want to make sure we're very transparent and all of that information is going to be included. Public input, as I mentioned, is the central part of this project and this plan. We want to make sure that what is being drafted is what the community wants. And so combining that with the Carrboro Connects goals and plans and feedback is really what drove the drafting and how we got here. From our public input, we had 6 recurring themes that seem to keep bubbling up with a lot of our events. Of course, there are a lot of other, comments that were not in one of the recurring themes, but these had a lot of commonality between event and event. So looking at more public spaces in the downtown area, affordability was a constant thing we heard about, both for housing as well as business space. Looking at the art, music, and entertainment, Cat's Cradle, how can that be leveraged, and other similar activities downtown. looking at mobility, access, and transportation with understanding that people want to walk and bike more, want to feel comfortable doing so, and how we can look at that. Adding plants and green space in the downtown area, so not just green park space, but also incorporating more nature throughout. And then keeping the historic identity of the community and allowing it to grow organically was also a theme that kept coming up. So we start with the vision and goals, and I'm going to read this vision. I know it's a little bit long, but I know we're also live on this. So the vision that we created based on the feedback we received is Carrboro's downtown area is a vibrant, walkable, and community-oriented space that balances preserving historic charm with thoughtful growth. The downtown area serves every Carrboro resident with particular attention to Black, Indigenous, and people of color and marginalized community members. As a place for daily needs, a place to gather with community, and a place to live. The downtown area fosters economic diversity, celebrates art and culture, and ensures accessibility for all. With the vision, we had 5 goals that are on the right-hand side, and the intent of the goals is if you can achieve those 5 goals, you can really achieve the vision and move forward towards that vision as a community. So the first goal, I'm not going to read these verbatim, but really building for climate resilience. Second one, looking at, as I mentioned, housing choice and a range of housing, affordable housing, workforce housing options. Improving pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, also helping to reduce traffic congestion. Supporting small businesses, entrepreneurs, and minority-owned businesses. And then maintaining the architectural integrity of historic buildings, while at the same time encouraging new investment and construction. The master plan chapter is broken out into 3 general areas. So we have the character areas that we'll touch on in just a second, representative renderings that we'll also look at depth on, and then streetscape typologies. The streetscape typology section looks at existing and then potential future. As you know, the streetscapes in the downtown area are extremely varied. And so we did take a slice of specific areas, but that is very specific to that one slice. So a lot of the elements in there, and which is true also of some other sections of the plan, are almost an a la carte of options for best practices, depending on the exact circumstance and scenario, because every property is very unique in the downtown area. When we looked at creating the character area plan, we looked as part of our background analysis at the downtown area, and there's some distinctive construction types, architecture, massing, building scale, building placement on properties that we wanted to capture and look at. So that's how we developed the character area plan. The downtown core, more commercial uses, buildings closer to the street, generally narrower streets. The core extension in the lighter pink on the screen are normally larger lots, buildings set a little bit further back, almost a little more suburban style, some more open space. It's not quite as developed. Surrounding neighborhoods are residential in nature. In particular, the Mill Village area has a distinctive style. And then the Lloyd Broad neighborhood, of course, is distinctive in and of itself, being a predominant Black and African American historic community. So we kept those 4 character areas. And each one of those, we looked at existing conditions and then set a future vision for those areas. That future vision had a brief description for what those areas might be, intended uses that would be appropriate, building types, building scale and placement, parking, and urban design. This is intended to help both the development community and the town, town staff, town elected officials, town appointed officials. When you have a project coming in and they want to locate in the core area, let's say, and they have a parking lot shown in the front, you can go to this and say, well, the vision for this area is parking is in the rear. So let's talk about rearranging your site, because we want it to be a walkable space, we want it to be pedestrian friendly, or the building is 1 story. And you look at this and say, the goal is 2 to 5 stories to increase some density in the core area. So let's talk about adding some density. So this is meant to be a tool to help guide development. It also helps the private sector when they're looking at different areas in the downtown to say, I want to build a 4-story building, what part of downtown would support that? And then they can come and start that conversation with staff and ultimately come to you all. We also selected 5 different sites in the downtown area and did representative renderings. So these sites that we selected are real. They are real property constraints that we designed against, but we blurred the edges so you couldn't tell whose property it was. We didn't want to put out there to say, so-and-so, we're suggesting your property should be different than it is today, because that is not the intent. We were, again, trying to show some examples for the development community to see what would fit in the downtown area and how development could achieve some of these goals. So in the 4 private development options, all of them include affordable housing in a variety of different spaces and uses. All of them include some sort of public-private outdoor space. All of them include streetscape enhancements, incorporation of native plantings and trees, in particular street trees, have varied architecture, or at different scales and intensity, have sustainable elements integrated throughout, and then have art as well. We also did 1 public space rendering for a potential downtown park space and included a lot of these things. So I'm just going to walk through these 5 real quick. I'll go right to left. I'm assuming this won't show up on the screen. Ooh, will it? Okay, great. But then I'm going to be too far back. Hold on, sorry. Is that not going to work? Okay. Let me rearrange everything up here. Okay. So this is a mixed-use development with a recreational focus. So on the right-hand side, we have a stream. So this is native replanting along the stream bank and restoration, sort of like a nature area. Has a parking deck in the back. So all the sites do have parking, but this is tucked in the back so cars can come to the site and park and get out, but it doesn't interfere with the actual site itself. Creating an open lawn area, sort of just a casual space, a playground. This has retail and commercial uses on the first floor, also on the first floor over here. And then the main focus of this is recreation. So this is like a recreation center, could be a YMCA, something of that nature. You can see an indoor basketball court that kind of spills out into a courtyard plaza space here. Enhanced streetscape, wide sidewalks, bus shelter right here at the bus stop. Interior courtyard that really draws the public into the space. This shows a splash pad in the back, native plantings, inviting space, movie screen on the side of the parking garage for, movie night in the plaza. And then has residential on top. And then you can see solar panels intermixed on this project as well. This representative rendering shows a mixed-use development along a greenway or multi-use path. This has native plantings being pulled from the vegetated area into the space. The main focus is along the path, not the street. So this site opens up and encourages connectivity with pedestrians and cyclists on the path. Has really unique branding and some architectural elements kind of scattered throughout. A variety of spaces with residential above. You can see this one's 6 stories. And then, again, active commercial spaces on the first floor. This also has a parking garage in the back that ties into the public street back here. So again, accommodating parking. We wanted these to be realistic so they actually could be developed, but also follow best practices of how to make sure the site is enhanced for the pedestrian experience. This is a context-sensitive development in the downtown core. So this is on a corner. This shows how you can enhance the main street on the front here. Is not Main Street, but the primary road on the front here, I should say, with colonnade architecture, having the private space spill out into the public space, street trees, again, activated first floor with commercial uses. This has an office on the second floor, and then residential above. This also has an alley through here that goes back to a parking garage. It's embedded inside and wrapped by the buildings. And you can see the steps down. This looks at assuming there's some 1 to 2 story homes on the right-hand side, further past these townhomes, that how you can blend new development in with the existing and not overwhelm the existing development. So you can see it stepping down and then also the character changing a bit as you get to the very edge where it may blend in with some existing homes. We have a mixed-use development with quasi-public space. So this also looks at a corner and creating a vibrant corner that is actual open space, not dissimilar to Weaver Street lawn, right? But this would be on a corner treatment of it. Again, activated first floor with variety of commercial uses, restaurants, retail, whatever that looks like. Office on the second floor, and then residential above again. And this steps down. This is 5 stories and down to 4 stories. Activated streetscape. You can see we looked at power lines as well, knowing that the cost to underground power is extremely high. So what would it look like if that remained above ground? So that would mean planting street trees further back, not underneath the power lines, and then sort of pulling the public realm a little bit closer into the private space. Gathering spaces, again, integrating native plantings, maybe some of these could be rain gardens into the space as well. With all of these private spaces, so this shows a step down, but it could easily be a step up when a developer comes and wants to talk. Maybe the development on the left-hand side is actually short, and on the right-hand side is taller, so the elements of the plan help provide guidance for developers and staff. It's not meant to be, this is what you have to build. The intent is showing ways you can build that meet the elements of the plan and provide that flexibility, sort of an a la carte menu to talk about how development in downtown will fit. With our downtown green space, very similar elements, widening sidewalks, put trees and street wells. This has interactive public art throughout the site, so maybe some music or some other things. Bike rack, rain gardens, some integrated play structures scattered around. I don't know if you can see these little tubes in the hills buried for exploratory play for children. A splash pad or a spray plaza. So it may not be a full-blown splash pad. It may be a plaza that has spray nozzles that you can just turn off and it's a plaza. Picnic areas and eating spaces, using trees and groups for shade, for natural shade creation. Also having a multi-use and flexible pavilion, maybe for pop-up concerts or little plays or something like that, or when it's not being used formally, people can just run around and play on it or sit underneath it and enjoy the shade offered by the structure, and then connection back into the neighborhoods as well. So the next chapter, we're looking at strategies and considerations. This is where the last chapter that you have in your draft plan. So this has a lot of information, general information and best practices, as well as overarching strategies and a variety of considerations for a whole host of topics. I listed a few on the right-hand side of the slide. I know when you go through the plan, you'll see this is a lot of information, and this is directly tied to the representative renderings of, providing recommendations for public art, having public art, some best practices to make it interactive, have it be unique, maybe provide, for different types, and same with landscaping, street trees, all these topics. And then we take this information and really looking at the implementation plan, which is the last piece, as I mentioned, that you do not have, that we've not drafted yet. And we marry implementation plan with the rest of this document and the public comments we've gotten to look at specific items. The implementation plan is very specific, and it's almost a checklist of things that you can go through every year in your CIP to look at, should we do, implementation 1.03, and then that is directly tied to a lot of these elements. So that is our next step, is continuing to edit this plan and then also draft the implementation chapter. We do have continued engagement, and then we'll be back before you for adoption recommendation and consideration a little bit later this year. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you so much, Danny, for the presentation. Council members, are there questions or points of clarification? Fred? Councilmember Fred? And Councilmember Posada, I know you're there if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, some of which are based on the presentation you just provided and some of which are based on my read-through of the longer document. Just a couple really quickly to orient me. When you're talking about historic buildings, what's the definition you're using for historic buildings?
So we look at anything on the National Register, anything in the historic district, to be bona fide historic. But as far as historic architecture, it could also be buildings that have just been here a long time. They may not be designated historic technically, but things that look like they've been part of the community for many, many years.
If you were going to go with an approximate year before which you'd probably say, oh yeah, that's probably historic, even if it's not on the register or in the district, is there, just to get a sense of how you're thinking about it?
So we've looked at it and talked with staff, and the mill era, right? So late 1800s to early 1900s. Technically historic is anything over 50 years, which puts us in the mid-70s. But again, that's the technical definition. Trying to look at the historic fabric of the community. And
It's a very generous definition. I think that's sort of getting at what I was asking about, because as an example, in some of our downtown historic districts, we have some buildings that have been profoundly renovated well within that 50-year range, but they fall within a historic district. So I was trying to get a sense of how that influenced your classification of character areas in particular.
so no one building influenced. We tried to get the sum of the whole and the feel of the whole. So if one building on a whole block had been modified, it really didn't change the fact that one block felt a certain way or was built a certain way. If 4 of the 5 buildings had been modified, it would have.
Thanks. I'm sort of getting at the Mill Village in particular here, where we've got an area which is obviously a historic area of town in one of your definitions. Most of those original buildings constructed in the early 1900s does have an overlay district, but large chunks of that, whole blocks of that, have been overhauled such that they wouldn't meet your sort of year-based definition. So just trying to understand how that fell in.
Yeah.
When you were coming up with your proposed sort of heights for the different areas, did you consider cost of construction in there at all? I know there are some sweet spots depending on what materials are being used for buildings that make certain heights make more sense than others. Did you consider that at all when you were putting that together?
So we did and we didn't. We didn't do any pro formas or look at specific numbers, but heights from 2 to 6 stories are generally affordable for construction. There is a line in there where you switch from wood to steel that changes costs dramatically, but also depends on the use of the building and many other factors. So,
Did that, I know when you showed the renderings, you said that you tried to make sure that those were buildable. Did you factor that kind of thing in, considering the different uses, for instance, or the height of your ground floor, things like that? Did you bake any of that logic in when you were thinking about those renderings?
we did, again, to an extent. We didn't do a
Right, not a
detailed
pro forma.
analysis of
Understood.
any of the costs, but yes, from locating different elements to architectural style to massing and scale, trying to look at what would be feasible for a developer who could actually build it and not suggest something that was wholly outlandish or wouldn't fit on a site or wouldn't actually be buildable at all.
Okay. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the process of generating those renderings. I noticed that, so I know that you got some feedback from the advisory boards on those. Did you ever take those renderings out for your general public feedback?
We took them out to the stakeholder groups for feedback, yes, ma'am.
Did you find that you got different feedback from the stakeholders versus from the advisory boards on those renderings?
Offhand, I'm going to say no. We did get some feedback. I know there was some desire to have more varied architecture. I know there was even brought up for example, of wanting a multifamily building that looked like a treehouse. So to that extent of architecture, that was a little bit different from the stakeholder groups that we did not hear in the advisory board. But I don't think any other large discrepancies.
Okay.
There were things we heard that we then incorporated in the renderings as well. So the only one that sticks out to me is that one architectural design comment.
Thank you. I think that answers all my sort of like questions to help orient me to the larger document, because I know we're going to give you more feedback beyond just tonight. But I did have one particular question, getting into the draft document. I really liked your streetscape typologies, where you're laying out what's the current layout of a representative street in, for instance, the downtown core. And then you're saying, well, based on the uses that we want to make in the downtown core, here's what that street might look like in the future. Something that stood out to me, I was actually really pleasantly surprised reading in particular about the downtown core area. You highlighted, and I'm gonna paraphrase this wrong, that the primary user in the downtown core is the non-vehicular user, right? And that you talked about narrowing streets so that vehicular traffic in that space would be cautious and would be yielding by default to pedestrians, as an example. Is that ringing a bell?
Yes.
Okay. What surprised me then when I looked at the example street typologies was that none of them actually showed narrowing of travel lanes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you put those streetscapes together and how you thought about the relationship between the stated goals and what your streetscapes should look like.
Sure. So I assume you're referring to the actual section itself? Okay. And I'll have to go back and look. I don't know offhand, but it very well may be the section specific locations chosen were in locations that the narrowing of lanes wouldn't fit in that particular place, or a project had just occurred where the curb to curb was kind of set, including the lane widths. So we focus more on the sidewalk and making sure bike lanes were added and sidewalks were enhanced. That's definitely something we can go back and take a look at in particular.
Okay. I really would love to hear a little bit more from you on how you square that, because I think the representative streets you picked were really good representatives, but I noticed that none of them actually involved any narrowing. So I didn't know if there were, then I was trying to get a sense of, okay, this is a really good goal in the downtown core to, it's actually a really strong statement in favor of slowing traffic and prioritizing safety in the downtown core, but then that wasn't reflected in any of the cross sections. So I was wondering, is there a different street that would be more representative of that effort, or is there actually a tension or a conflict between the sort of textual goal that we're claiming to carry out and then how that would actually look in our cross sections?
Okay. We can definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Other questions, Councilmember Merrill?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback off that too. Would love to see narrower travel lanes, even if it is just paint. I mean, if we're not changing the curb to curb, but we're just putting, we're painting buffers between the bike lane and the car travel lanes, just to narrow that kind of visual effect for drivers and, slow the design speed, just kind of make drivers naturally more cautious. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Merrill. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah, thank you for this. It took a lot to go through it. There's a lot of material here, and I don't know that I completely satisfied, the processing of all of it, because it's, there's a lot of material here. So a couple of questions. One is just overarchingly, I got to ask about commerce, because I didn't get a good feel. I can see residential density, but what kind of dedication will there be to the commerce needed?
So there's information peppered throughout, especially in the strategies and considerations section, regarding encouraging a variety of spaces and uses for commercial businesses to keep affordable spaces, and also not only potentially consolidating some smaller lots into larger. There are a lot of small lots in downtown, I know everyone is aware, which is an awesome asset to have. It allows for a lot of small businesses, a lot of startup opportunities, affordable rent. But then at some point, businesses also reach a cap where they don't have space to grow. And so in order to keep those businesses downtown, because that's what you want, right? You want them to start there, you want them to stay there, you want them to continue to stay in the heart of the community. Looking at how some of the larger lots can be retained as larger, because there are only a handful of larger lots in the area. And so not encouraging those to be divided further, but encouraging those maybe to have some larger spaces so businesses can start in a smaller space and grow and then move into a larger space. We also have elements talking about how the opportunities the town has to help support when a redevelopment does happen, because we know it will eventually, right? And the business may get displaced, how they can be displaced locally and not displaced out of the community. So how can they stay in the downtown area temporarily while where they used to be is being developed, and then potentially move back? And we know, talking with economic development department folks and looking at other opportunities, we talked through some of those strategies of how the town may be able to assist in that regard. And also making sure the focus is on daily needs businesses, not boutique businesses, not businesses that only offer high-end goods,
That's
but
right.
Very good.
have daily services, because the intent of the downtown is to live your life, right? It's for daily living. You can live there, you can work down there, you can meet all your daily needs. So having spaces that encourage, and again, I know it's hard because you can't say this storefront has to be X, this has to be Y, but having some overarching goals and language in here that the intent of the community is to have all daily services to be able to be met in the area, and a variety of spaces at different price points as well for businesses, the same as residential.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought it was missing from the renderings. Because the renderings do not show me where daily life needs are included, and yet, on the feedback showed one of the first, the basic needs was the largest interest. I don't know whether it's a high 70% or whatever. Can you go to that slide for a moment? I have it on attachment page 92. No, sorry. No, that is not the one. It's like a graph. Anyway, it just shows that that's the key interest of folks, to be able to shop for the things that they're most interested in
Day-to-day.
in downtown. So I did not see renderings that suggested that Carrboro would be moving in a direction that could meet those needs, at least from the renderings. That's number one. Number two, I didn't see anything about a micro-transit hubs, because Carrboro cannot survive on the folks who live in the area that's in that downtown shaded area. It is dependent upon people coming in. It is dependent upon being a destination. And therefore, if we want to reduce vehicle use, car vehicle use, there needs to be microtransit hubs, not to mention the fact we haven't even talked about how that can happen. But that needs to happen. I think it's down in Selma. The mayor is working on creating microtransit that is viable. I think that's part of this conversation that's critical, because you cannot create an environment that is based on purely residential folks walking and biking, to be sustainable financially. So those were the two biggest takeaways, but like I said, I really went through this rather quickly because it's huge. I love the fact that there's a lot of attention to tree canopy. And I would just say, how do you suggest, the town tackle that when so much of it is private business? And in addition to that, trees take 20, 30 years sometimes. Our most fabulous legacy trees are almost 100 years old. So what, it's great to look at these and see it fully developed out, but what happens in the interim? What are the ways that we can provide that same kind of look and feel? And finally, the other point I would make has to do with the question of character, because I'm not really clear on, and I'm really glad Councilmember Frey mentioned the Mill Village, because it's more than the Mill Village. There's one rendering you have that shows, I don't know, it's a 3 or 5 story building right next to, yeah, that's it, next to a, a house which could be, the architecture is vernacular, so it could be a brand new house, but just looking, having that feel. And I know that these are just renderings of what could be in terms of step back and height. Given that, how does the town go about redeveloping and incorporating those feels so that it's not, if you go down a certain block, you're going to have it, but another one you won't? Charlotte is a very good example of that, where you've got these mega skyscrapers, bumping up right next to, within the same block, on West Trade Street comes to mind in that area.
Yeah.
So how would you answer?
So, yeah, it's a very good question, and definitely it's going to be a challenge. Again, the small lots also make that a little bit interesting. This was an example that we wanted to show. So the townhomes on the right-hand side are actually intended to be with this development. So, and then the existing homes would be further to the right. And on this site, we looked at, there were single-family 1 to 2 story homes immediately adjacent, which is why then this sort of builds in the similar architecture with some style before you go into the larger, more urban context to help ease it into the existing neighborhood. But a lot of that is going to be, honestly, with your next topic here about your UDO update as far as the regulatory piece.
Right. But I just thought it was interesting that you, through the downtown plan and the draft, the question and the acknowledgement that character matters came out, and that's why I asked. Yeah, I do understand that. One last question regarding commercial. How much conversation should we be having about what do we want our commercial portfolio to look like? Because that's also critical. And you mentioned the Cat's Cradle. Cradle's actually going to be redeveloped. The Cradle is a perfect example of hospitality, which is key in Carrboro. But we also know that several of the small business owners can't make it on hospitality. And so, how do we, or what would you recommend to council in terms of having a conversation and being able to, build an economic development plan that is incorporated with this downtown plan. So for example, there's parcels that the Economic Sustainability Commission has talked about in terms of creating these different nodes. That should be part of this, because for those of us who've had those conversations with the Economic Development Commission, you know, we should all be on board with what is possible. So that goes back to my earlier comment about, you know, commercial being in the renderings, and without names, naming parcels, but knowing that there are parcels that are perfectly situated and have enough space to create, you know, economic hubs.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, appreciate it. Oh, so no. Anyone else with any questions? I do want to say that while council members may be thinking about whether they have more questions, that you will continue the public engagement phase. I guess I could ask, we all know that we have community members that are keenly tuned in to everything that happens, you know, here at Town Hall, which we appreciate. And certainly there are those who are not timid about local government coming to Town Hall or any type of scenario like that. I appreciate you making the effort for our BIPOC community. And I just was wondering how you felt at this point about how your engagement has been going as it relates to those that we don't hear from very often, but live here in this community.
So I think working with PSG, with Friesen Nichols and town staff, I think the outreach has been very robust. I know Duncan mentioned a lot of the efforts at the beginning of the meeting. I don't think we've heard from all the members of the community that we would like to, which is why we're looking at our upcoming events being held where they are, and with the Juneteenth event, and trying to make sure we provide ample opportunity for every member of the community to provide feedback. Of course, we can't force anyone to tell us stuff. We can just make sure that they know that we are wide open to hearing from them and would love to hear feedback from anyone and everyone in the community, because everyone's voice matters. And we want to make sure we incorporate their thoughts and feelings and desires for how the downtown area develops moving forward. And just try to have the welcome mat out as much as we can and make sure the community knows that their feedback is welcome.
And so is it PSG?
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
you say they dissolved?
They did, unfortunately. Yes.
And so their work was done with you when they dissolved, so you wouldn't need to hire anyone again? So their work was complete as
Correct.
far as this project?
We do not need to hire anyone again. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else have it? Councilmember Frey.
Thank you. And just wanted to say thanks for taking my detailed questions. And just to sort of summarize, I found this plan, the draft plan, quite interesting and helpful for visualizing conversations we might want to have, you know, with our other consultant around the UDO rewrite. Overall, I think that what I saw was a little bit less dense than I was expecting, and a little bit more concerned with visual context than I was hoping for. And I say that because as I'm looking at your set of goals, it's not that we want the downtown to be insensitive to neighboring context, but equity and anti-displacement are considerably more important than the visual, right? Because if you, how can I put it? It's entirely possible to have a town that looks like it respects that historical context and welcomes in neighbors who have been longtime residents, but actually it's a bit of a theme park, and the longtime residents have long since moved out because they couldn't afford to stay. So the affordability and the equity components of it, to me, have to take on some additional weight compared to that context. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting because I think some of your renderings were a little bit denser than your guidelines for the same areas, and some of those were quite pleasant. I think the one along the bike path was probably the one I thought did the best job of capturing the feel. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out with your future future adjustments to that draft.
And I will say, so one of our survey questions, and I know in one of your 17 attachments to your staff report, the memo, the review has on page 5, survey question data that looked at height in particular. So that was one thing that we did ask, trying to gauge the community's tolerance for tall buildings. Bless you. And you can see, I mean, most people were, you know, in the up to 3 stories,
Probably kind of
3 to 4. So more than 5 in the downtown central business district was 24% of the respondents. So
So
76
that makes
people wanted
complete
less
sense.
than that.
I'm not at all surprised about that. My question is, how does that, I imagine that people rated affordability very highly. I'm guessing you didn't offer them a question like, would you rather have 3 stories and it be twice as
Affordable.
expensive or 6 stories? You probably don't have any data yet that helps people think about density in the context of affordability. I don't know if that's something you're able to get in future outreach. But that's sort of where I'm going with that. Like, I'm not at all surprised that that's what folks are saying. Personally, I find that 3 to 6 story spot, that feels really, comfortable and human scaled. But as we're thinking about where we step down from that height or how we relate to adjacent areas, it has a huge impact on affordability, and that's been front of mind for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I will just draw an underline in the. I mean, in a couple. I tend not to think too much about aesthetic and character considerations. I think some of the discussions that we are having here, I think Councilmember Frey illustrates a great point, and it sounds a lot like the conversations that we have with neighbors, which is where kind of these two abstract values compete on affordability, which is always what we hear, and then character, which is usually like the second or third, depending on who you're talking to. All to say, I think for my personal calculus is, I tend to be pretty dismissive of the idea of character and sensitivity about height, because I think what so many people like about our downtown is just a familiar phenomenon. People hated brownstones in Brooklyn when they were built. People tend to react very strongly to change and to become very fond of it pretty quickly. That said, I was pretty surprised by the feedback that you received from the planning boards, or not the planning, the joint advisory. I was surprised by the strength of the reaction to the initial renderings. I appreciate the work that you've done to kind of make them a little bit more, usable, hand feel. They're a little less austere. They're a little less every place in the way that, and I think that that's valuable. I recognize the needle you're threading and trying to sort of find the right level of specificity to not overly intimidate, but to give some concrete for what we're looking for. I'll just say, this is long-winded context to say, we have a lot of these conversations, and I think it's valuable for you to hear that I am particularly interested and will continue to advocate for, and I think, as we push toward completion here, we have heard that community engagement. We will hear that community engagement. It's really valuable that we have it, and it's, I think, given us a lot to think about in terms of the way that we are sensitive to each community member's kind of varying comfort points with things. Don't worry about that 24% too much. As we want affordability, and I think we have a sense for what it's going to take from a lot of conversations that we have with a lot of people one-to-one to make those secondary considerations not necessarily front of mind. I for what it's worth, from my point, personal read here, I actually think we're we're a little warmer on these renderings than maybe Councilmember Frey feels. I just wanted to jump in and say, we understand that caution too, and we, I think, are interested in taking responsibility for it while we really push on the affordability.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Now I see you, Councilmember Posada.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think more of my questions are kind of more on the kind of community engagement piece of it, but I did want to also um, echo the sentiments of the Mayor Pro Tem as well as Councilmember Frey, specifically on affordability. I won't go deeper on that. They've already done a really good job kind of speaking to that point. I wanted to ask a couple of questions around engagement, right? So I was looking at the materials and they're quite extensive. So I appreciate that, but I haven't gone through everything. But I was looking specifically at the engagement and who has been contacted to be part of some of the surveys and some of the conversations. So first, I want to say specifically when it comes to like Hispanic and Latinx engagement, I think it's been really great. And I saw some of the pieces that were in Spanish. I think at the Latin American Festival, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the pieces. I'm curious, outside of kind of that piece in Spanish, are there been other conversations in multiple languages? You know, we do have quite a large community that doesn't speak either English or Spanish, and I wanted to, like, as a primary language, and I want to check in on how that's going, and I might have missed it.
No, sure. Duncan, would you mind speaking on, because I know town staff has done a lot of outreach efforts. Would you mind
Yeah, absolutely.
speaking on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Just to highlight Councilmember Posada, we've made sure that we've had translators at all of our large events and produced all of our written materials in English and Spanish. We've also worked heavily with communication and engagement as they've set us up with the language line service, and we publicize about that at our events and work with Kat and Eve on that. We haven't had anyone who has used that service, but we did when we launched Social Pinpoint for this project. We did make sure that Social Pinpoint also included tools to translate that survey into Karen, Burmese, Arabic, as well as Spanish, of course. And so that is not to say that the work is complete, but we have tried to make language access a central piece of this project.
No, and I appreciate that deeply. I think that's a great step, and I appreciate the staff and everyone working on this project. On that, I know that as we continue engagement, I wonder who are some of the community partners who might be able to also kind of deliver that message. I know that specifically when we were doing kind of Spanish language work as a town, it took quite a number of efforts for multiple people to kind of build trust into that system. So, and again, sorry if I missed it or it's in the packet, but I just kind of want to follow up on that piece. Like, what does engagement with partners, specifically outside of kind of English and Spanish, look like?
Yes, we've worked pretty extensively with the Refugee Community Partnership to work with some of our Burmese and Karen speaking community members. And then I know that this is not necessarily a specific language, but again, with communication and engagement as well as race and equity, we are continuing to reach out with community partners, including El Centro, but also the Marion Cheek Jackson Center, as well as the NAACP, who oftentimes will have kind of more of their foot in the door with different community organizations and community members. So the Refugee Community Partnership has been a huge part of that, and we are continuing to work to build relationships with other community members and community organizations as well.
No, thank you for that. Again, I think including different sectors of our community in this piece is key for me. And as I look at continued engagement and looking deeper into some of these policies, I want to see, or this plan, I want to make sure that we're continuing to engage folks and where they're at in community. Outside of that, I have some broader questions, but I don't really have kind of the words to put it into it. So I might just follow up through emails once I've gotten a little bit more time to digest it fully. But I like the overall kind of my feeling on this is I like the way it's going. I want to see kind of affordability being a key piece of this. I'm curious about kind of that balancing act of character versus affordability is a big issue. I don't know if I'm as dismissive as the Mayor Pro Tem of kind of character, but I'm also not as concerned deeply concerned with character. I don't know, kind of figuring that out as we go through this. The renderings were very helpful, so I will say that. And yeah, just thank you for the work being done, and let us know if there's anything, either staff or anyone working on the project, if there's any connections that we can make in order to kind of be more inclusive of different folks in community as well. Not that we don't want to include other folks or like, not include people, but sometimes in these projects we hear the same folks, the same conversations over and over, and I want to make sure that we're opening the door and making as much possible, as easy as possible for folks we don't typically listen from to put their voice in the hat, or whatever the saying is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Posada. Councilmember Palmer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo that thanks for the renderings. This is actually the third time that I've seen some renderings, and it's really clear that y'all are iterating and incorporating feedback, and I think in some of the places and times that I've seen people interact with them, folks have gotten very hung up on the notion that a rendering is a place that we are trying to make, rather than an example of different elements that we might incorporate. And so I just want to make sure that we echo back out to the community that if there's something you don't like about this, don't worry, we're not building that tomorrow. And in fact, nothing like that might ever be built. It really depends. And as I see someone in the audience who reminded me, it's about heads and beds. Some of the businesses that we want to see to be able to just live our lives in Carrboro, no set of incentives, no building height is ever going to get them here without us taking some specific steps. And so I'm going to zoom in on, let's see, what page is this? It's attachment A, page 105, and what I've got. And if I zoom back out, it's under the strategies and considerations document. So I don't know if I don't think that was part of what we covered in your presentation, but yep, no, that was it. So I see two different interventions on the right. Their creation of a municipal services district jumped out at me, and public-private partnership jumped out at me for different reasons. And so two different questions. The municipal services district, I know Chapel Hill has some, is other than like a parking deck, what is an example of a reason that we might want to consider doing that to get the sort of lifestyle businesses that we're thinking of? We need this in Carrboro. We don't have this now.
So great questions. Let me back up and say, so these are general strategies that, again, feed into implementation. So if looking at a municipal service district is something of interest, one of the implementation steps would be evaluate a municipal service district, its extents, funding, how it's staffed, all those sorts of things. These are examples of strategies that communities can use to achieve some of the goals identified in the plan. So municipal service districts, they can do a lot of different things. It really varies from community to community. Sometimes it's purely advertising just for businesses. They do business support, so they can be, and just anyone listening, or if this is recorded and posted online, a municipal service district is a special tax district that's created. It's created by the elected officials, and it's an additional tax on top of the current taxes, only for a specific area in town. And when you create those, you have to identify the tax rate and how that money is being used. And every community uses it, as I mentioned, a little bit differently. Sometimes they're staffed. Sometimes you create its own organization that is staffed. It's really common with the Main Street, tying it with a Main Street program. Sometimes it's just part of the town. And it could be beautification, it could be landscaping, it could be hanging baskets, it could be infrastructure. You can use those funds for a lot of different things. It just has to be used in the district itself. And the cost or tax on top, it varies widely as well, depending on the services being provided. And the public-private partnerships, again, those can run the gamut. It can be everything from the town owns a piece of property and you want to see a certain type of development, so you partner with a developer to build that, and as part of that, the property is transferred to the developer or sold to the developer. It could be a a simple improvement being made to an intersection, and you do a public-private partnership and a development agreement tied to do smaller projects. So again, that runs the gamut of scale as well.
Thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate that. So that's several steps down the line in what we're looking at with this downtown area plan project, which, if either of those, would make sense for us to meet our goals. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions, colleagues? All right, thank you, Danny.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And definitely, please feel free to pass any feedback to staff, and they can make sure that that gets over to us as well. So thank you.